Hello, guys, and welcome back to J.P.'s Retro World. I am your man, J.P., and we're going to do a little walk and talk style today because I'm just in the mood to be moving around and stuff. I don't get a lot of exercise, not nearly enough, so I'm going to try to get my steps in while I'm doing this video. But today's video is going to be on Rocky 3. Rocky number 3, that's right. Starring, once again, Sylvester Stallone as Rocky Balboa. Now, the premise of this movie, okay, so after the last movie, which he beat Apollo Creed, the World Heavyweight Champion, so now Rocky is the World Heavyweight Boxing Champion. And early on in the movie, we see a montage of Rocky, who at this point is now rich, he's successful. Him and Adrian live in this big house. They've got all this money. They've got all these cars. And, he's doing commercials. He's making TV appearances. He's appearing on, like, The Muppet Show. And he's doing things like that. Meanwhile, they're also showing a montage of Clubber Lang, played by Mr. T. And he's moving up in the ranks by just beating opponent after opponent after opponent, beating him easy. But they also show Rocky, defending his title, beating opponent after opponent. But so early on in the movie, Rocky agrees to fight the World Heavyweight Wrestling Champion, and that is Thunderlips. And Thunderlips stars, that's right, this guy right here, Mr. Hulk Hogan. So that scene was pretty cool. It was a pretty fun scene, and it just shows, Rocky, like kind of talking to Thunderlips, saying, "Hey, if we could just go around and, I'll punch you, you chase me around a little bit, it's been great for the fans, you know what I'm saying?" So then chaos ensues and everything gets crazy, and Paulie actually ends up in the ring with a chair and hits Thunderlips with a wooden chair, and the chair breaks, and Thunderlips throws Rocky over the top rope. Rocky comes in, throws Thunderlips over the top rope, and that's just weird. And so basically nobody wins the fight. It's all just for charity. It's all just for fun. Anyway, but at the same time, Clubber Lang is in the audience, and Clubber Lang at this point, he knows he's the number one contender. He knows that he should be the one getting a title shot at Rocky. So then we see Rocky having a press conference announcing that he's going to be retiring from boxing. And but actually I have to back up a little bit, because during the fight with Thunderlips, we see Mick, Rocky's trainer, who's kind of an old man. He's at ringside, and he's got kind of like he's having like a heart issue, and he's having some medical issues. So that will come into play a little bit later. So Rocky announces his retirement. Clubber Lang is in the crowd that day and confronts Rocky. He's like, "Hey man, you've been down to me. You don't want to fight me. You're afraid to fight me." And I'm not going to say Mr. T's catchphrase, because we all know what his catchphrase is, and I don't know what the rules are about. I know he owns that catchphrase, and I think if you say it on a published video or something, or you gotta pay him or something like that, I don't know what the rules are, but we all know what his catchphrase is. But anyway, he confronts Rocky. Rocky says, "You got a big mouth, man," because Clubber Lang talks about Adrian. He's like, tells Adrian, "Hey, why don't you come over to my apartment? I'll show you what a real man is. Because you don't know what a real man is." And so, of course, Rocky gets mad. Nobody talks about his wife that way. So then Rocky's like, "Yeah, I'll fight you anywhere." And Mick's like, "No, kid, you ain't gonna fight that guy." So Rocky's like, "Well, Mick, I want to fight this guy." So then Mick says, "Okay, but you're gonna do it without me." So then, in the next scene, Rocky catches up with Mick and asks him, "Why don't you want to train me for this fight? I've had all these other title defenses." And then Mick says, "But those were different. Those opponents were handpicked." And then Rocky's like, oh, there were setups, and Mick's like, no, not setups. They were good fighters, but they didn't have any heart. And so Rocky, feeling like Mick's been carrying him, decides, okay, now I have to fight Clubber Lang. I have to fight him. So Mick reluctantly says, okay, fine, I'll train you. So they start training, but Rocky really doesn't put 100% into it. He trains, but he doesn't really train hard. He makes a public spectacle, and he rents out a banquet hall and has all these, souvenir stands set up, and he's got a ring set up where he's like training, but he's not really training very hard because he figures, oh, this is my last fight, so I'm just going to go out in style. So meanwhile, Mick's begging him, come on, Rocky, let's go back to the old jet. Let's get some sweat. Fine. Excuse me. So it's time for Rocky to fight Clubber Lang the first time. So the first time, right before the fight, Mick has a heart attack, and then he tells Rocky to go out there and fight Clubber Lang anyway. But Rocky ends up losing the fight within the second round, and so Clubber Lang's now the world champion. But Rocky goes back to the locker room. Mick dies, and it's this really sad scene where Rocky's crying. He's like weeping. He's just sobbing really, really loud because, Mick is kind of like a father to him. So then you see Rocky burying Mick, and there's like a funeral at a cemetery. And so then we see Rocky at Mick's gym, and then Apollo tracks him down. And Apollo convinces Rocky, hey, I know your manager time's got you all messed up, but let me train you, man. Let's prove to the world that this guy can be beat. Challenge him again, and I'll train you. So Rocky reluctantly agrees. So then they go out to L.A. and they train. But at first, Rocky doesn't really want to train very hard. His heart really isn't into it. So then Apollo's like, there's just no point. It's over. I'm not going to bother if he's not going to put his heart into it. So then Adrian talks to him. And, why did you come here? So Rocky finally admits that he's afraid. And that's why he's not been training very hard. And Adrian's like, you don't have to be afraid. Just fight this guy. And if you lose, at least you lose with no excuses. At least, you lose saying that you gave it your all. So Rocky's convinced. So then he starts training really hard. So then, long story short, he fights Clubber Lang again. This time he wins. He wins the fight, and he's triumphant once again. And Rocky emerges the hero. And once again, the world heavyweight boxing champion. So then the Rocky 3 ends with Rocky and Apollo at Mick's gym, and they step into the ring, and Apollo wants to fight Rocky one-on-one, but without any cameras or referees or anything. He just wants to make sure that it wasn't a fluke the first time Rocky won their fight. So Rocky 3 ends with Rocky and Apollo throwing punches at each other, and then the screen goes still, and then the end credits roll. And that's Rocky 3. It's a good movie. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it, especially if you're into old school wrestling and old school movies, because the immortal Hulk Hogan's in this movie. And interesting side note, if you didn't know this already, but Hulk Hogan actually ended up getting fired from the WWF back in the day because he decided to do Rocky 3. So because Vince McMahon Sr., who was in charge of the WWF back then, told Hulk, hey, you're an actor, or you're a wrestler, not an actor. So if you do this movie, you're not going to work here. So Hulk said, well, I'm going to do the movie. And so he was actually fired from the WWF. But he later went to the AWA, the American Wrestling Alliance, for a few years. And then Vince McMahon Jr., who's been in some hot water lately, but he took over for his dad, and he invited Hulk to come back. So Hulk came back and had an amazing run. So anyway, interesting side note. Anyway, but yeah, that's Rocky 3. I'm probably going to sit down here in a minute, and I'm going to be shooting some more videos, probably because I went and I watched WrestleMania 17 and 18 back to back, and I made a few notes, mostly just writing down who was on the card and who won and all that, and just so I could remember, because I really haven't seen either of those very much, not as much as the old WrestleManias, because at some point I don't know, I wasn't as interested and I wasn't as emotionally invested in those later WrestleManias, so I really haven't seen them very much. So anyway, so I'm going to do those, and more wrestling figure matches coming up for those of you that really like those. The story must go on. So anyway, that's going to do it for this video. So if you're new and you like what I'm doing, go ahead and quickly click that like button, and go ahead and push the subscribe button. It helps me out too. And I will definitely see you next time.